Hello, it's Mr. Westra here with Half Brother reading number 21, part 1. Just to give you a heads up of where we've been last time. So last time, Peter and Ben were training a new research student named Joyce Leonardin when Zan tried to bite Joyce. They're not really sure why he did that, but he tried to bite her. And as well, the 60 Minutes piece aired on TV. And they thought it was going to be a great success, but they focused on the learning chair. And Richard and Ben and Sarah are worried about what will happen to the project and what will happen to the image of the project based on that news piece. So here we go. We're going to pick it up. The next morning, I half expected people with signs to be demonstrating outside our house chanting, "Free Zan! Free Zan!" At school, when I got to homeroom, someone had put a stuffed chimp on my chair, all tied up in string, with a note saying, "Somebody help me!" It made me feel really sad, and even though I tried hard to think of something funny or outrageous to say or do, nothing came to me. So I just threw the toy in the garbage can and sat down. I didn't feel like a dominant male right now. When Dad got home that night, he poured himself a drink. "Lots of calls?" I said. "Lots," he said. "And I found out who gave CBS the picture." "I have a pretty good idea," said Mum. "The producers of the show got hold of a list of all our research students," Dad said. "They called a bunch until they found someone willing to say something negative. It was Susan Wilkes." "Her?" I exclaimed. Creepy Susan, who looked at Dad with adoration and nodded at everything he said. "I thought she loved you." "She did," Mum said coldly. I stared at her, startled. "Really?" Dad sighed and actually looked embarrassed. "Sarah, is this necessary?" "She was heartbroken Dad didn't love her back," Mum said. So this was her revenge. The second weekend of October there was a big storm, and the winds brought down a lot of dead branches from the elm in our backyard. When Mum and I took Zan outside the next morning, he got really excited. He scampered around, gathering up all the smaller branches and dragging the bigger ones and arranging them in a mound. "Do you know what he's doing?" Mum said in amazement. "What?" "He's building a nest." "Really?" I'd read about how chimps made nests in trees. It had surprised me, because it seemed so unlikely. Something birds and squirrels did, but not chimps. Mum nodded. "Absolutely. Go get your camera." When I came back, Zan was still fussing around with the branches. I snapped some photos and I climbed up and flopped down in the middle of his nest, half hidden. "This is incredible," said Mum. "Chimps in the wild start doing this around 1 year old. Zan's never seen a nest. No one's taught him to do this, but he does it anyway." "How, though?" I said. "It must be genetic," said Mum. "It's all there in his brain. No matter how hard we try to raise him as a human, he knows he's a chimp." It made me happy to think there were parts of Zan we couldn't touch. I took lots of pictures for Mum. She said Dad wouldn't be interested, but for her own research, studying the difference between chimp and human behavior and development, this was important data. That night, while helping to clean up after dinner, Zan jumped off the sink and walked over to the wall and stared at something. After a couple of minutes, I went to see him, to see what he was looking at. It must have been pretty interesting to take him away from his beloved washing up. "What?" I signed. He kept staring. As far as I could tell, there was nothing there. Then, without warning, Zan bounded back to the sink, jumped onto the counter, and grabbed the dish soap. He tricked me. He'd set me up. He gave a shriek of delight and sent out a spray of soap, but I caught him fast and wrestled the bottle away from him and tickled him until he was laughing so hard he couldn't even sign more anymore. Chapter 16. Weather Change. It was the Halloween dance, the first one of grade 9, and when I found Jennifer in the swirl of light and sound and heat, I asked her to dance. "I don't really feel like dancing to this song," she said into my ear. "That's cool," I said. "How about the next one?" "I just don't feel like dancing right now." It was a lie. I'd seen her dancing earlier when I came in. "You danced with Hugh," I pointed out. She seemed annoyed. "So? You think you better than Hugh?" "No," I said, confused. I didn't understand why she was being this way. I felt my face heat up and was glad she wouldn't see it in the half-light of the hall. "Are you mad at me?" I asked, which I instantly knew was a mistake. It wasn't a dominant male question. "No. Why don't you ask Selena to dance? She loves dancing." "I don't want to dance with Selena. I want to dance with you." The next song had just started up, and it was really good. I smiled and tried to take her hand. "Come on." She frowned and pulled away. "I'm not your chimp, Ben. You can't just order me around or tie me up." She looked past me and smiled and waved. "Hey, Shannon! Jane!" Somehow, this made me even more upset than the chimp comment. Like I'd been dismissed. Like I wasn't even there. For the first time, I felt angry with her. And it wasn't a small anger. It was big and hot. What had I done wrong? What more was I supposed to do to please her? She started walking off, and I felt my fury swell and push at me, and before I could stop myself, I said, "Why are you being such a bitch?" She stopped and turned to me with a look of real disgust on her face, and then she just walked off. The music pounded and my heart pounded faster, and for a split second I wanted to pull her back, but I didn't. All the anger gushed out of me, and I felt sick and totally ashamed. I could see Jennifer talking to Shannon and Jane, shaking her head. Then Jane looked my way, and I turned and walked to the farthest part of the hall. Everyone was going to hear I'd called her a bitch at the dance, and everyone would think I was a jerk, and now Jennifer would never like me. I'd gone and crashed Project Jennifer. I saw Hugh talking with David, and jealousy surged through my veins. So it was Hugh she liked. Hugh was my rival. In a fight, male chimps went first for the toes. They'd bite them off. That immobilized their opponent. Then they'd go for the fingers, so they couldn't grab and hold. Then they'd go for the face, to maim, to bloody the eyes so he couldn't see. And last, they'd go for the scrotum, to castrate him, so he'd bleed to death. That, I read, was what chimps did to each other in a real life or death fight. It scared me even thinking like this, and I didn't want to be here anymore. So I left the hall fast, found a payphone, and called for Mum to pick me up. Zan knew right away I was sad. Saturday morning when I went into his bedroom to get him dressed, he looked at me really intently. Maybe it was my face. I'd been up a lot of the night crying, and probably looked crappy. Or maybe it was my hoarse voice. He kept coming up to me and stroking me and signing sorry. He thought he'd done something wrong. "Zan good," I signed to him. He looked at me. I didn't know what he thought of that. Zan good? He knew food was good, and ginger ale was good, and tickling was good, but I'm not sure we'd used good in any other way yet. Could he understand that people could be good too? He gazed deep into my eyes, like he could see all of me. It was such a kind look, it started me crying again. And Zan frowned and put his face closer to mine and touched my tears and tasted them and seemed very surprised. "Come hug," he signed. "Tickle hug." And after we'd had a good long hug and tickle, he pulled away from me and signed, "Hide now." He covered his face with his hand, peeking, which was his way of asking for hide and seek. He was trying to cheer me up. I shook my head and signed no a few times. He brought me over some of his favorite dolls and put them in my lap. Then he sat down on top of me and patted me a lot. He knew how I felt. Sometimes brothers didn't need to say anything. School was torture. If I'd been more confident, I could have carried on with the dominant male routine and been unapologetic. Sure, I called her a bitch. Big deal. She deserved it. But I couldn't do it. The moment I arrived at school on Monday, I just felt like a cockroach. I felt like I should be scuttling around into corners and under desks so nobody would stop me. Whenever Jennifer came into my peripheral vision, I looked away. Wednesday after school, David and I were in the change rooms after cross-country practice. We were the first back from the run, so we were alone. David took a plastic bag from his locker and passed it to me. He seemed uncomfortable, even a bit sorry for me. This is from Jen. I opened up the bag and saw the ABBA album I'd given her for her birthday. "She loved that album, man," said David. I chuckled bitterly. What did she say about me? I'd always been too afraid to ask, but there was nothing to lose anymore. Not just now, but in general, over the last year. David shrugged. She must have said something. She thought you were a nice guy, fun to hang out with, stuff like that. A fun guy, I said. Wow, that's exciting. We made out, David said nothing. Did you tell her about the logbook? I demanded. That big book with her name on it? Yeah, that one. He grimaced. Sort of. What'd she say? I asked. Jane said it was creepy. You told Jane too? I said in horror. She's always over at our house, David said. She's like an evil stepsister. I just told Jen You had this book where you wrote stuff about her. It looked like a pretty thick book, man. I mean, Project Jennifer. It looked like you were running an experiment on her." "It wasn't an experiment," I muttered angrily, but the words stung. Had I been treating it like an experiment? Was she my little chimp, just like she said at the dance?